Mrs. Johnston, it is knowledge and social studies time. We are working in Unit 12, Presidents and American Symbols, and we are on Lesson 6, Abraham Lincoln. Before we begin today, let's go over and review what we have already learned. We have learned that pilgrims were one of the many groups of people to set up colonies in North America, and that there were 13 colonies in which the colonists lived, and they all had to answer to the King of Great Britain. The colonists decided to make a new nation because they were tired of answering to the king and wanted freedom to make decisions for themselves. We have learned about two of the founding fathers of our country, George Washington and Thomas Jefferson. What important document did Thomas Jefferson write? The Declaration of Independence. From what country did the colonies declare independence? Great Britain. After the Declaration of Independence was approved on the 4th of July, the colonies became a new nation. When we celebrate Independence Day on the 4th of July each year, we are celebrating the birthday of our country. Who was the general of the army and the founding father who led our country in the American Revolution and helped win the colonists their liberty? George Washington. What else did this person do? He became the first president of the United States. When our founding fathers wrote the Constitution, a set of laws for the country to follow, they decided the United States would not become a kingdom. What kind of government is ours called? Our kind of government is called a democracy. Unlike a kingdom that is ruled by a king, a democracy is a country ruled by the people. So, how does someone get to be president of the United States? He or she must be elected or chosen by the people. Can you name the first three presidents of the United States? George Washington, John Adams, Thomas Jefferson. Although we won our freedom from the British and elected many presidents after Thomas Jefferson, there were people in the United States who were not free people. Over 100 years ago, Some people in our country were enslaved. Do you know what the word enslaved means? Enslaved people are people who are forced to work without being paid and are not free to decide how to live their lives. Today, slavery is against the law, and people know it is wrong. But long ago, it was not against the law. People from Africa were brought to America on ships as enslaved people for the colonists. When the colonists decided to fight for their freedom from Great Britain, they themselves were keeping freedom from a large number of enslaved people. Many of our founding fathers realized that slavery was wrong, yet they did not vote to get rid of it as they should have done. Many farmers had enslaved people to do the work on farms, especially in the South, where they had large areas of land to farm. Enslaved people could not leave the farms without permission, and they were not free to make their own choices. About 200 years ago, one of the biggest issues Americans were arguing about was slavery. Many people in the northern states thought slavery was wrong, whereas many people in the southern states felt they needed slavery. About 150 years ago, northern states and southern states fought a war over slavery. Does anybody know what this war was called? This war was called a civil war because it was fought between people who lived in the same country. Listen to today's read aloud to hear about Abraham Lincoln, who was the president of our country during the important time in American history known as the U.S. Civil War. Abraham Lincoln often wore a very tall hat, and they should listen very carefully to find out what President Lincoln had in his hat and why it was so important. If I asked you what you kept under your hat, you might laugh and say, "My head? What else would I keep under my hat?" The word head means the part of your body that contains your brains and face. President Abraham Lincoln kept his head under his hat too. You may have seen pictures of a tall, bearded man wearing his tall, black hat. But sometimes Mr. Lincoln kept something more than his head under there too. Here is the story of what lay beneath Abraham Lincoln's hat. What do you think is under his hat? Abraham Lincoln was a busy man, surrounded by many other busy men who helped him make important decisions. They grew impatient when they had to wait to meet with the president. So on this particular day, as they waited to see their chief, President Abraham Lincoln, they were not in a good mood. You heard the word chief before. What does the word chief mean? The person in charge. They became even angrier when they entered President Lincoln's office and found him in his rocking chair, his long legs stretched out before him, holding a book and laughing aloud. Each man thought, "We are in the middle of a war. Does the president think we have nothing better to do than to listen to him laugh? We do not like war. We do not like sending people off to fight. We worry all the time whether we are doing the best jobs we can. Yet he does not look worried, even though he is in charge of the whole war." The war they were in was the U.S. Civil War between the northern states and southern states. Lincoln and his men fought for the northern states and were against slavery. Lincoln asked the men to sit down. He said, "Welcome, gentlemen. Before we get down to business, listen to this joke." The men listened as the president read the joke out loud. Then he laughed again, but no one else laughed. One man said, "Mr. President, did you ask us here in order to read us a joke? That is a waste of our time." Lincoln set down his book. His face became serious. Serious means not smiling or happy. "That is why I called you here today," he said. "But running a war knowing that people will get hurt or killed is a sad business. When I can laugh, I do. For I do not laugh. I might cry. I thought you could use a laugh too." He stood up, all 6 feet, 4 inches of him. That was a lot taller than most men in this time. Walking to his desk, he picked up his tall black hat and reached inside. Pulling out a folded piece of paper, he said, "I have been carrying this paper inside my hatband for more than 3 months, waiting for the right day to show it to you. Today is that day. I have word that our army has won a great battle. Perhaps we are beginning to win this terrible war at last. Now I feel safe in telling people what I want to do next." What is the terrible war Lincoln is talking about? The Civil War. When George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, and others started the United States 100 years earlier, they tried to make a country in which people could be free to do what they wished and to travel where they chose to go. They did many wonderful things, but they failed to do one important thing. They did not end slavery in America. Slavery is the situation in which people called enslaved people are forced to work for someone else without pay and without having the freedom to live their lives the way they want. Being an enslaved person was the worst thing a person could be. An enslaved person had to do whatever he or she was told. The enslaved person did not get paid to work, but only received very plain food to eat, clothes to wear, often old clothes, and a place to sleep. The enslaved person could not choose to leave or decide how to live his or her life. Some of the people who started the United States said, "Slavery is a terrible thing. We must not allow it in our new country. We believe in freedom. How could we have enslaved people here?" But other people answered, "Slavery is fine. The rest of us will be free to decide things for ourselves, but enslaved people will not. If you see there will be no slavery, we will not help start the new country. George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, and their friends knew slavery was wrong, but they thought, we need enslaved people to help start the country. Afterward, we can end slavery. People thought they needed enslaved people to help them do their work, especially the farmers in the South. The year before Thomas Jefferson died, he called slavery a tornado that will burst on us sooner or later. He feared there would be a war between those who wanted to end slavery and those who supported it. Abraham Lincoln was born in Kentucky the year Jefferson finished being president. Lincoln was born to a poor family living in the forest in a tiny cabin made of logs. His parents did not know how to read or write. Lincoln had to work hard to help them, and since he was a fair, honest person, he grew up believing everyone who worked should be paid fairly and treated fairly. Later, as a young lawyer, he gained a reputation of being the most honest lawyer in Illinois and was known by the nickname Honest Abe. Your reputation is how most people think of you. Who else have you heard about who had a reputation for being honest? Did you say George Washington? Lincoln hated slavery. However, he also hated war. And when he became president, he tried to prevent the war from starting. But too many people on both sides were angry about many different issues, including slavery. In the South, there were large areas of land to farm, and that is the area where there were the most enslaved people. Because of this, the nation was divided. The North, colored in blue on the map, against the South, colored in gray on the map. People in most southern states decided we'll start our own country that allows slavery. The North, with Lincoln as president, refused to let the South do that, saying, we should be one country and we should not allow slavery. The war Thomas Jefferson had warned against began. This was the U.S. Civil War. On the day that President Lincoln invited these men from the government to his office, he told them, I am going to announce that enslaved people in southern states will now be free. According to the law, I wrote that law on the paper I have been carrying in my hat. I call the law the Emancipation Proclamation. I'll proclaim or let everyone know that the enslaved people are emancipated or set free. Anyone who doesn't let them go is breaking the law. President Lincoln went on. Everyone must understand that America is truly a land of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, just as Thomas Jefferson wrote. The other man replied, Mr. President, we will gladly listen to your jokes if this is what happens afterward. But even after President Lincoln told everyone about the new law, many people who supported slavery would not give up. It took nearly 3 more years of war before the Army of the South surrendered to Lincoln's Northern Army. The war ended. Now slavery was over, and the important paper that had helped make it happen was what Abraham Lincoln had been carrying under his hat. What was Abraham Lincoln's nickname? Honest Abe. Why do you think he was given that nickname? He was honest. What was the main issue over which the U.S. Civil War was fought? The main issue was slavery. Who was the president during the U.S. Civil War? Abraham Lincoln was the president during the U.S. Civil War. In the read aloud you heard, Lincoln proclaims something very important. What did the paper under Lincoln's hat proclaim? It was a statement for everyone to know that enslaved people would be set free. I hope you enjoyed today's story about Abraham Lincoln.